Repeat this for 21 days and the universe will start to bow to you. There exists a peculiar phenomenon that crosses generations, hardworking, disciplined people who have consumed personal development content for years, yet remain stuck in the same patterns of result. They do everything right. They study, work, exercise, even practice gratitude, but feel as if there were an invisible handbrake preventing any real change. Why do certain people seem to flow naturally toward what they desire, while others, even with double the effort, live in a perpetual state of almost there? And what really happens when someone insists on the same thought, on the same mental ritual, every day for 3 weeks? If you seek to understand the mechanics behind your perception and want to retake command of your mental energy, subscribe. Here, we investigate what the majority only feels but does not explain. Warning: this documentary uses AI-generated images for illustrative purposes. Although the visual is synthetic, the content is the fruit of rigorous research based on real scientific, psychological, and behavioral sources. Sources in the description. It is 3 in the morning, and you wake up with that familiar sensation, the specific weight of a mind that cannot rest. It is not common insomnia. It is as if there were an internal engine running in idle, processing the same problems, revisiting the same worries, feeding the same cycle of thoughts that you already know by heart. You close your eyes, but the mind continues playing the movie of your current life. And for some reason, always the same movie, with the same characters, the same dilemmas, the same predictable endings. For decades, a simple idea has circulated in self-help books, personal development workshops, and motivational videos. Repeat a practice for 21 consecutive days, and something fundamental changes in your reality. The premise is seductive because it promises that transformation does not depend on exceptional talent, luck, or extraordinary resources, only consistency. 21 days of repetition and the universe, they say, will begin to conspire in your favor. The problem is that the majority of people who try this approach fail, not for lack of discipline, but because they are operating with an incomplete understanding of what really happens during these 3 weeks. They treat repetition as a magical ritual, when in truth they are dealing with one of the most powerful and misunderstood mechanisms of the human nervous system, the attention filter. The human brain processes about 11 million bits of information per second, but consciousness manages to register only 40. This means that you are constantly missing 99.9% of the reality around you, not by deficiency, but by design. If you tried to consciously process everything the environment offers, every sound, every peripheral movement, every change of light, every bodily sensation, every passing thought, you would simply collapse. The brain evolved to be a relentless editor of experience. But here is the detail that changes everything. This editor is not neutral. It has preferences. It prioritizes that which you consider relevant, important, or threatening. And the most effective way to convince your nervous system that something is relevant is conscious repetition. When you focus deliberately on something, an opportunity, a goal, a new version of yourself, for enough time, the brain begins to reorganize its attention priorities. Researchers call this the reticular activating system, a network of neurons responsible for determining what deserves to reach your consciousness. It is as if you had an internal assistant who decides which emails arrive in your main inbox and which go straight to spam. The daily repetition of a specific focus is, essentially, a way of training this assistant. Maxwell Maltz, the plastic surgeon who inadvertently created the myth of the 21 days, observed something fascinating in his patients. Those who underwent facial reconstruction surgeries took a few weeks to get used to the new appearance. It was not just physical adaptation, but a neurological process of acceptance. The brain needed time to stop rejecting the new image as strange or incorrect and start treating it as normal. Maltz was not speaking of cosmic manifestation. He was documenting a neurobiological phenomenon, the time necessary for new patterns to cease being treated as anomalies. The interesting thing is that this same principle applies not only to body image, but to any change of mental or behavioral pattern. When you repeat an affirmation, a visualization, or a focus ritual for several consecutive days, you are essentially hacking this system. You are saying to your attention filter, "This is important, pay attention to this." And as the days pass, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to notice opportunities that were always there, but were filtered as irrelevant. You begin to act in a slightly different way because your perception of what is possible has changed. You begin to make choices that before would not even cross your mind. The phenomenon is so consistent that many people interpret it as evidence that the universe is responding. In truth, it is the opposite. You are finally responding to the universe, perceiving signs that were always available, but that your old pattern of attention systematically ignored. Think of when you decide to buy a specific car. Suddenly, you begin to see this model everywhere. It is not because the population of cars of this type increased overnight. It is because your brain now considers this information relevant. The same happens with opportunities, ideas, people, and possibilities when you train your attention to focus consistently in a specific direction. But there is a real tension here, and it explains why so many people abandon the practice before the 21 days. In the first days, the mind resists. It treats the new focus as an invasion, as something artificially imposed upon its natural pattern of worry. It is common to feel that the repetition is forced, strange, even ridiculous. This resistance is not a sign that the practice does not work. It is a sign that it is working. You are encountering the inertia of the old self. The issue is that the majority of people interpret this resistance as evidence that this is not for them, or it is no use anyway. They abandon precisely at the moment when the brain is beginning to yield. It is like stopping physical exercise exactly when the muscles begin to adapt to the stimulus. But what few people realize is that this initial resistance is not a lack of discipline or willpower. It is something deeper in the way the nervous system processes changes. Let us enter this layer now. Around the 10th day, something interesting begins to happen. The repetition that before seemed artificial begins to gain a different quality. It is no longer something you are forcing yourself to do, but something the body begins to recognize as part of the routine. It is at this point that many people report a subtle change in the quality of the experience. The practice ceases to be conscious effort and begins to be automatism. What is happening neurologically is fascinating. Each repetition is literally creating and strengthening neural connections. The brain is an adaptive organ. It changes its structure based on usage. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, and it is a phenomenon so powerful that it can completely reorganize the way you process reality. When you repeat a thought, an intention, or a visualization every day, you are essentially sculpting new neural paths. In the beginning, these paths are like fragile trails in a dense forest. Each repetition is like passing through this trail again, making it a little clearer, a little more defined. With time, the trail turns into a road, the road turns into a highway. And when this happens, what before required conscious effort now flows automatically. But there is an even deeper layer: emotional chemistry. Each thought pattern activates a specific cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones. When you live in patterns of worry, anxiety, or frustration, you are literally bathing the body in cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress substances. With time, this chemical cocktail is not just a response, it becomes identity. Your body comes to expect these emotional states as normal. The conscious repetition of a positive or constructive focus is not just a change of thought, it is a change of chemistry. Gratitude practices, for example, are associated with measurable increases in serotonin and dopamine. Visualization, combined with planning, activates reward circuits that motivate action. Regular meditation reduces inflammatory markers in the blood. It is not placebo, it is internal pharmacology. Here is where the popular concept of energy gains a scientific basis. When people speak about changing the frequency or raising the vibration, they are describing, without knowing, measurable changes in the biochemical state of the body. The subjective sensation of high energy corresponds to optimized levels of neurotransmitters associated with well-being, mental clarity, and motivation. The sensation of low energy corresponds to biochemical imbalances associated with depression, anxiety, and fatigue. The repetition of specific practices for 3 weeks is not enough time to create permanent changes, but it is enough to generate internal evidence that change is possible. It is like a trial period where the body experiences a different state of operation. And once you know what it is like to feel different, clearer, more motivated, more confident, it becomes much harder to accept the old pattern as normal. If this pattern makes sense to you, consider subscribing to follow the next investigations. But there exists a phenomenon even more intriguing: self-fulfilling prophecies. The sociologist Robert Merton discovered that beliefs can create behaviors that make the belief true. If you believe deeply that you are changing, you begin to act like someone in the process of change. You expose yourself to different situations. You take calculated risks that before you would avoid. You persevere in the face of obstacles that before would make you give up. It is not the universe bowing. It is you stopping to bow before your own self-imposed limitations. Because the greatest obstacle to change is almost never external. It is the automatic repetition of the old self. The mind that says, "This will not work. This is not for me. I have always been this way anyway." 21 days is not a magic number. More recent research, such as that of Philippa Lally, shows that habit formation varies drastically. Sometimes 18 days, sometimes 250. But there is something symbolically powerful in these 3 weeks. It is enough time to cross the initial phase where the mind treats the new practice as an invasion. It is enough time for the body to begin to recognize a new chemical pattern as familiar. And it is enough time for you to collect internal evidence that a different version of yourself is not only possible, but is already emerging. The question that sustains this investigation is not whether the cosmos obeys human thought. The question is more human and more powerful. What really happens when you stop outsourcing your change to external factors and assume complete responsibility for the internal state you inhabit every day? Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote daily reminders to himself as a practice of mental discipline. He was not trying to bend the universe, he was trying to tame his own mind. Centuries later, this is still the only thing you can control completely: the quality of the attention you dedicate to the present moment and the conscious direction you give to your thoughts. When you repeat something every day for 3 weeks, you are not manipulating cosmic forces. You are doing something more practical and more powerful. You are finally bending yourself in the direction of the person you chose to become. And when this happens, external reality has no choice. It needs to reorganize to accommodate this new version of you that now inhabits the world.